Welcome back to the Coaches Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Trey Belcher. With me, as always, as owner of Go Performance Clarksburg in Clarksburg, Maryland, and Gemini Fitness Solutions, Corey Smallwood. How's it going, Corey?
What's up, Trey? Good to be back.
Oh, it's always good to be back. And with us today is this very special guest, one of my mentors in this industry, owner of Functional Movement Systems, Lee Burton. How's it going, Lee?
Hey guys, appreciate you having me on. Things are going pretty well.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you on. And I've talked about you being one of my mentors for, throughout our podcast. So I always want to extend my gratitude because that's what a lot of this is about, is the connection between people and sharing gratitude and sharing the story. So thank you for all that you've done for me over these years, Lee.
Well, Trey, anytime somebody tells me that, I'm very humbled because you never know who you influence and how much you influence them, and seeing your maturation and kind of your career path go from, where you were when I knew you as a student at Avery University to where you are now has been certainly rewarding for me. So I appreciate you saying that.
Well, I've told Corey this story about the first time that you, Gray, and I had lunch. And with Gray, I don't even remember the name of the restaurant. It's in Chatham, and it's not there anymore. But we were sitting there, and Gray gets off on his ideas. He's like, "We can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this." And you say, "I don't know. I'm going to need to see some numbers on that."
I learned the hard way with Gray, that's for sure. He's got a lot of great ideas. He can only execute on one, maybe one every now and then.
Well, at the time, I didn't understand things the way I do now, so I can empathize with you quite a bit more than I could then. Back then, it was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm cut out for these guys. I might not measure up, but thankfully, we both grew, and here we are now, just a few short years later, doing these things. So, it's always good to circle back and sort of connect all these things together. So you guys have started off the new year 2025 introducing the FMS Academy. So you've kind of got all your courses together now. So tell us a little bit about the FMS Academy.
Yeah, so the Academy in and of itself is, like you just said, Trey. It's you get all of our online content for one price, and we have done our best to lay it out as more of a curriculum. So when you come in and you identify yourself, whether you're a strength coach, personal trainer, athletic trainer, physical therapist, we try to, let you know the path that we recommend. And most people coming to us now have gone through at least one of our courses. But now if you've gone, I think the big thing that we're trying to communicate to people now, that if you've gone to one of our courses, whether it's the FMS or even the SFMA, you've only got to pay like $200 to get access to all of the courses. And, it's, when you think about, well, why do we, the question is, well, why did you guys do that? One of our courses 6 months ago was $1,000. One of our courses was $600, and now we're kind of packaged them all up. And I think the landscape of online education has changed, but I think, one, we got to a point where we have a fair amount of online education now. We've been building it for, our first online education was FMS level 1, and we put that out in 2012. And now we've been slowly adding to where we've got probably 50 courses, which still is not a lot when you look at some of these other online education companies. And we're very specialized. So that's what we did. We felt like we were in a position to do it. But let's be honest, all of us know online education, the landscape of online education has changed dramatically since COVID, to where pretty much everybody is putting up online education, good, bad, indifferent, quality, not quality. Doesn't matter. It's out there. And, in order as a business to compete, we had to reevaluate what we were doing. And, we feel like we've got a lot of good quality education. So we're like, you know what, let's throw it out there and see what happens. And it's been good. Obviously, it's only been about 6 weeks now. I think the one thing is we also are trying to re-engage our community, and, we're kind of the old guys now. We've been doing this a while, and people look at us as like, yeah, I've been there, done that. But we do have a lot of new things. We got a lot of new stuff coming out this year. So we'll see what happens.
Nice. You talk about COVID, and when COVID happened and you guys started the FMS virtual classes, then so I'm 15 minutes away. So I get to be the model. I call myself the dummy. And I started off doing the SFMA courses with Kyle Kiesel. And when I got in there, Kyle said, hey, however you move, just kind of dumb it down a little bit. Just make it look bad so I can have something to fix in the second part. I said, okay, great, no problem. So then we get into the FMS course. So I do my first FMS course with Lee, and we go through the first screen. It's a deep squat, and I'm operating on that same operating system. So I make this squat look terrible. So as I do it, I see Lee kind of buck his head and kind of look at me kind of funny. And so move on, go to the hurdle step, and I make this look awful. Then we go to lunch break, and Lee says, hey, man, do you move that poorly? And I was like, no, Kyle told me to make it look bad.
It was pretty obvious you were trying to fake it, yeah.
Yeah, he said, don't do that. I said, all right. So we go back out for lunch, and my lunch is perfect.
So, just do what you do. Yeah.
My mistake.
Yeah.
My mistake.
No, those virtual courses, we're very fortunate when COVID hit that we have a studio. We made our own studio. We've been producing content, like I said, since 2012. And when COVID hit, it was pretty much easy for us to pivot and do those virtual courses. And even now, I mean, we did a virtual course on low back pain last weekend. And believe it or not, people are still tuning in. You can watch the online content or you can do a virtual, but people still like the virtual. And I think it's just that live interaction you get out of them.
Sure.
Lee, real quick, tell us, and the first time I saw you guys was probably around 2012, 2013 at a Perform Better seminar, one of their workshops, summits. And I was like, wow, I mean, just opened my mind up as far as screening individuals and the importance of using that within my business and the differentiator that it can create, that type of stuff. But a lot of people, and even a lot of people that are watching this that are familiar, think functional movement screen, and it's functional movement systems. Talk a little bit more. There's a million different screens out there. I think what really makes you guys the apex, the top of the best in this niche is the systems behind it.
Yeah, and Corey, that's I'm glad you brought that up because it does. One, we created our own problem by saying FMS, and we got pretty popular, with the functional movement screen it being the FMS, and we've always thought of ourselves as more of a concept, philosophy, a kind of a family of different screens, tests, assessments. We've got a lot of tools in the toolbox, which tool's right for which situation. And that's where we kind of look at it more of a system. Mm-hmm. And if you think about, I think especially in our profession, we talk about programming and programs. What's the right program for this person? Well, we look at it, again, the way we do at FMS is we look at it as a system. And what I mean by that is you've got to recheck, you've got to tweak, you got to make some changes. Whereas a program is just that. It's like, here's your program for the next 30 days. Well, are you going to change that over the next 30 days? How do you know it's working? When do you progress? And what we always try to get people to understand, especially when we look at our screen tests and assessments, is you've got to find out if you're actually making progress with how they move. Just because I have somebody with poor shoulder mobility and I say, here's your exercises. Well, I've got to go back and recheck to make sure they're working. Because if they're not working, I've got to pivot. And if they are working, I have to pivot because I can't just keep having somebody doing the basic quote unquote correctives, which that in and of itself, I think was a big problem when we started talking about it. It's even still a big problem because you're still creating the right quote unquote program for the person that should be baked in your correctives or the things that this person needs or that group needs. And the system is always trying to reinvent, change it, make sure you're on the right path. And I think that's where we just look at this as a system, philosophy, concept. We're never telling you, and I think this is one reason we became pretty popular. I'm never going to tell anybody exactly how they need to fix or work out their person because I'm not there with them. Gray's not there with them. What we're simply doing by our screens and our tests is giving you some guidelines, some guidance. And when we started this thing, it was simple. If you can't do a push-up, then why in the world are you trying to do a bench press? If you don't have good upper body and postural control, upper body mobility, then why are you overhead pressing with a lot of weight? And that's the simple fact. So that's where we started. And then people say, well, how do we fix this? We say, well, we got to correct it. Then this whole thing of corrective exercise started, being the real big rage at this point. And for us, it was all about, hey, we're giving you some guidelines. We're telling you, you got to create this more systematic approach, check your work, reinvent it every so often based off the reactions. Because let's be honest, no matter what you do with an individual today, they can screw it up tomorrow. So you've got to keep an eye on those gauges. And that's where we look at it more of a system than just here's your workout plan, for the next 30 days.
Yeah, as a technician, I understood. I was like, okay, good. This is what that hurdle test does. This is, the overhead squat. As a business owner, I could see the system. How can I use this throughout my gym to impact the most amount of people? How can I have all of my trainers speaking the same language? I can now say, oh, that person scored a 2 on this, and now every coach knows, got that. And then I think that's where this academy is going to really take off is, okay, we're level 1. Well, what's next? And again, it's more of that system. Now they get to see it all under one platform and go, oh, now I can take it from this level, and now I can do this course or that course and just move my career forward. As if it's a fitness professional watching this podcast, they can move their career forward from this academy. And then as a business owner, I can now use it as a tool for all of my coaches.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, Corey, because we're not business guys. Gray and I and the team that kind of started this aren't business guys, but we were all working in a clinic together, and we wanted to speak the same language. And I think really what started this was us trying to get the coaches. When I say coaches, not strength coaches, I'm talking the high school football coach, the basketball coach, the people that were coaching these kids in the weight room. Because my background is athletic training, I wasn't necessarily in the weight room. Is to create this model and really what you're describing, communication between people, to say, okay, this person is this way, whether it's a bad squat, bad lunge, whatever it is. We say 0 or 1. Well, that means something to people that go through our system, so they then know. Because if I'm going to hand off Trey a person who's got a screen of 10, he understands what that means. I'm not telling Trey what to do with the person, but he understands what that means, and then he can take that handoff and make progress. And I think especially when we start talking about the different disciplines, whether it's fitness, strength and conditioning, physical therapy, that was a major driver. And what we're also trying to do is kind of break the walls between these different professions, where the physical therapist and the strength coach actually talk and work together, as opposed to, okay, you guys don't know anything about physical therapy, you guys don't know anything about treatment, whereas the strength coach is going, you guys don't know anything about, programming an athlete. And just realize, hey, we got to stay in our lanes, but there's got to be a handoff at some point to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah, it's huge. The chiropractor that I work very closely with is SFMA certified, and we talk all day. He's like, hey, I'm going to send so-and-so to you. And I mean, it's seamless. And then it really builds confidence in that client. They're like, wow, look, my two professionals that I'm relying to make me better are speaking the same language. That's huge in building that trust and confidence in the client.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, we got to have this team approach of, no matter whether you've got just a 55-year-old looking to come in and lose weight versus a 17-year-old getting ready to go to a Division I school to play football. They need kind of a team, because you never know what life's going to throw at them. And if I'm training a 17-year-old and they go and play basketball and tweak their ankle, I need to be able to quickly say, hey, you need to get in and get checked out. And I need to be able to communicate, because a 17-year-old Division I athlete going in with an ankle sprain versus a 25-year-old going in with an ankle sprain, totally different people going in with the same injury. And you got to have that ability to communicate with that other professional.
And in my business and having FMS and Gray's office so close by, I can just send them up to HQ, and so I've kind of got it made in the shade when it comes to that. But one thing that my people will recognize using the FMS, they appreciate the structure and then the systematic approach, because they don't see that anywhere else. And it just gives them a comfort to know that A, this person knows what they're doing, and B, if something goes wrong, we've got a whole group over here that can address whatever issue may come about.
But one thing that we don't even talk about because we don't know what the hell we're doing when it comes to marketing, and we're talking about social media and how to get your message out. We were very lucky in how our message got out. Very, very much grassroots. Things kind of fell into place, but we did something early on. I want to say it was probably 2007, 2008, right when we were starting to get popular, I would think. And there was this large fitness chain that did a pilot project, and they took, I want to say, 10 facilities that did the FMS and intake. So everybody did the FMS and intake at this facility. 10 didn't. So they had another 10 that didn't. Well, they just compared to the other ones that didn't. So these are a lot of chains, So the other groups that didn't, the group that did the FMS had a 20% increase in personal trainer signups versus the same groups that were not using the FMS. Now, when you take somebody off the street and you do an FMS, they have no clue what you're doing. And these were pretty green. Some of them weren't. I can't say everybody, but some of the pretty green trainers. And then when they did the follow-ups, like, okay, what did you get out of this? Trey, you just pointed something out that's what these clients said on why they felt this was more engaging, because they felt that this screen felt that the trainer was much more knowledgeable, and they figured out what they needed. They were basically saying, here's what you need. Here's why we're doing this. So that communication, that engagement is what did it. It wasn't necessarily the nuances of looking at the lunge or the hurdle, whatever you get out of it. It was like, all right, Corey, you even touched on it. This is a little different. This trainer is more telling me what I need. They're invested in me versus just, hey, let's get on the treadmill and let's start walking and let's do this exercise program. It's more about them.
Mm-hmm. When I screen people, when I bring people in on intake, part of my spiel is I say, all right, you tell me what your goals are, and that's one part of it, and the screen's going to tell me what your needs are, and we're going to put all those things together, and we're going to get a more robust program for you, because it's going to take all of those things into consideration, and it's going to help get you where you want to be a lot faster than just random guessing. So as you guys were growing in FMS, in that 2006, 8, 12 time, kind of take us through that period. That's the one thing that I don't know all that much about, but I've always been curious about, is kind of where you guys, what your mindset was. You had young kids at the time, you're a college professor, pivoting to a different career. We talk about pivoting, how was that time in your life?
It was a blur. But I'll take it back just a few years before that, Trey. And, if I had not even put a date on it, but I think that, like I said, there's certain things that happened that allowed us to kind of get in front of a larger audience. And one thing that I will say is two things I'll say is, one, we're very fortunate early on that we got into the military. We were working with military special forces, I'd say 1999, 2000, right after we came up with the functional movement screen. And we had some significant, I would argue that they were pilot projects, some really, really good results with what the strength coaches and athlete trainers who were using it in those special forces groups, with their injuries being reduced. So we saw that. And in the military, if you see something that's working, everybody's going to gravitate. So we were really starting to grow within the military pretty quick during that probably 2000 time frame. And the reason, here's the reason I say you're lucky, more luck, but you gotta When somebody gives you an opportunity, you got to grab hold to it. What also was occurring at the late 90s is because especially in the special forces primarily, there were so many injuries during training. These guys did not have any structure. They were just told they had to work out. So the government basically decided at the time that they needed to hire strength coaches to be strength coaches, athletic trainers, and they're going to treat these people like Division I athletes. When I say people, these soldiers, operators in the special forces. So they dedicated all this money and they were bringing in all these strength coaches. Well, the strength coaches were coming in and we were having some positives with some of those early strength coaches that were brought in using the movement screen. So then it just started to catch on and it started really, really going. And at the same time, we were starting to gain some traction just with our local region area, just going out. And the one thing that people don't get, the only way you can get popular is grassroots and just doing hard work, or getting somebody to invest and have plenty of money to get you there, right? If somebody just hands you a bunch of money, you can get popular, but you can't sustain it if you don't have quality of what your message is. We had quality of what our message. We've never had any money, never had any investment. This has all been Gray and Lee pretty much doing this from day one. So we were lucky in getting in front of different universities. Well, Gray and I've always called them early adopters, who were somewhat influential. And it was just local, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, University of Virginia, were places we would go, not get paid. We would go and say, what do you guys think? We got this thing. We think it's kind of cool. It seems to be working. And then they would take it and they would give us feedback and, lo and behold, start working. But the one thing is, we started working with Reebok. That sounds crazy. How do we go to Reebok? Well, one of the Reebok at the time, and I'm going to make this quick. I'm going to speed this along, Trey, to get to where you're getting at. But Gray was speaking at a small little regional conference in Charlotte, and a Reebok representative was there. And at the time, Reebok had something called Reebok University, where they would train fitness professionals. And it's no longer there because Reebok, basically 2000, 2001, when everything kind of went under, that whole thing went under. But they really were interested in helping us, get our message out. So they brought Gray on as a consultant. And then at the same time, this is what's interesting. At the same time, they got the contract for pro sports to be the apparel for the NBA, NFL, NHL, pretty much all the pro sports. Well, one thing that they said is, hey, we'd like to have a splash and educate the strength coaches and athletic trainers. Well, we're sitting there with the FMS, who we're already knowing it's working. No research, but we're having just positive benefits from this. Most people don't know this story. So they gave us the opportunity to go in and do basically what's called a boondoggle, which is, hey, we're going to fly all these strength coaches and athletic trainers down to Florida. We did one in Florida and one, I think, in Arizona during the off season. And we're going to give them continuing education. And they said, you guys teach them. You guys are the expert. Teach them what you want. So we taught them the movement screen. We basically taught them a level 1, level 2 over a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. And again, like anything else, I teach a workshop today. I got a handful of people that are going to like it, a handful of people are really going to like it, and then a handful of people are going to think it's right. No different. But we had quite a few of these strength coaches and athletic trainers gravitated to it, started using it, started having some benefits from it. And that's what kind of got us. And then Reebok went down. And at the same time, when Reebok got down, here's the pivot point, I think, is Perform Better started doing more, and basically picked up Gray and said, all right, since you guys have a contract with Gray, I'd love for Gray to come on the Perform Better. And you're talking 2002, 2003, start speaking for Perform Better. And Perform Better was kind of on our same trajectory. They were starting to go up. And that's how we got connected with Perform Better. And same thing, we just started speaking, and then Chris from Perform Better wanted to start sponsoring us. So that takes us to where you are, Trey, to where 2006. So I think it's important. That was the background that got us to working with Perform Better and Chris. And I think at that point, we both organizations, FMS and Perform Better, started taking off, especially when you look at the summits and the one-day seminars and all the education that Perform Better that was providing. And at that same time, nothing to do with Perform Better or any of that, we started getting a lot of requests to go around and teach the FMS. So I started flying around in literally 2000, all over the United States, teaching the FMS for little or nothing. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I went to the Buffalo Bills in 2001. They paid me $200 plus my flight to be there for 2 days. And so when people say, well, Lee, what are you going to pay me? I'm like, you know, you got to start and you got to do that. So our reputation, I think, has allowed us to get to a lot of places. When we get to 2007, 2006, I was already teaching, and I was very fortunate to have some people early on want to teach, like they really liked what we were doing. So we started, trying to groom some instructors, not because I knew what I was doing, but more out of just necessity. Because as you said, I was teaching at a university. I was also finishing up my PhD. Had one young kid at the time. So it was just a blur. And we got to 2010, and I think we knew we had to start creating some structure. And I think that's another, I would say, pivot point, where it was just getting, one, we were almost losing control of our message. And I think here's another important thing for people to kind of wrap their heads around, is during that time, I was also getting a lot of people teaching the FMS wrong. I mean, they would go to a seminar and then they go back and teach it. And then I was getting all kinds of emails or phone calls at the time saying, Lee, I heard about this thing from such and such. They taught it to me. And I'm like, oh, they didn't teach it right. So one of the things we did, and we wanted to do, we knew we needed to publish a book, which is what prompted the book, was because everybody was, and I'll use the word ripping us off for lack of a better word. We knew they were ripping us off and really watering down our message because it was getting further away from Gray and I. So we said we knew we had to write a book. But that's also what prompted us to do online education. Because at the same time, I went overseas and taught a class in 2008 or 2009, some type of time frame. And a lot of people already seen it, heard about it, doing it. And I'm like, you guys are doing it all wrong. So that's really what prompted us to do online education. We really didn't see the online education being a moneymaker back in 2010, 2011. We use it more as a resource for some of our instructors and a resource for people who wanted to know about the movement screen. So, because we always felt at the time that why would somebody want to see an online class? You need to go to a live seminar. Right. But online education is what it is today. So honestly, it was a blur. I think those few things kind of fell into place that I mentioned. We were both lucky. The timing was right, but we took the opportunity and we did something with it. And let's be honest, we had a pretty damn good message and philosophy. So I'll pause right there because I know that was a lot.
No, but that's what this is. That's the whole point of the our podcast, is because these are the stories. These are the things that Trey and I are curious about. And when we started Coaches Unscripted, we were like, let's talk to these guys, our mentors, the people that we look up to, and try to model our careers after, and say, what got them there? Everybody knows FMS, but what's the origin of it? Where did it come from? How did it's a 20-year overnight success. Let's hear about those 20 years. Yeah,
and Corey, it's funny because I'll say another thing that helped us along, and this is, people may not believe this, I think people believe it when I tell you. When we taught one of those early workshops when we were Reebok, and somebody from the NASM was there, and they saw us do the overhead squat. And, we've always said, you can't just look at one pattern. You got to look at all 7 to really create a good profile of how a person moves. But the one person liked the overhead squat, liked how we did it. Well, then they put the overhead squat inside that curriculum. And that's where the NASM really took off with their assessments and dissecting the overhead squat. And basically, if you can't squat, it's a laundry list of crap that's wrong with you. And then they came up with the corrective exercise course. Well, because they did that, I argue, that actually helped us, because if all you do is look at the overhead squat and you don't look at anything else, you're not going to be successful. It's going to take you longer to get where you need to get to. If you take 5 more minutes and do the other 6 tests, you can pinpoint more of what they need. So that even though you could argue they were our competitors, which I never looked at them as competitors, that actually helped us out quite a bit, because people still to this day don't understand why you have to look at fundamental movement. And so our message is still blurred in a lot of ways. But that actually helped us along. And then I think just a matter of trying to align ourselves with good people when we really start. Because I think the other thing that Trey, you're probably getting to your initial question a few minutes ago is, I was getting pulled in all different directions trying to teach the seminars. Gray's out there getting pulled in all different directions, really being the person who's the messenger. Like, he's the philosopher. He's out there telling people you need to do this. Then on Monday, after Gray does a seminar, or not seminar, wherever lecture, I'd get a call with people wanting to do a workshop. And then I'd figure it out and go do a workshop. But when I realized that, all right, I can't do this, I got to pull people in that want to help me teach or do whatever, making this more of a structured business. That's when I had to start figuring out, all right, one, how do I make sure that I'm charging the right amount? Make sure that the person going teaching is, I'm paying them enough money where they're not getting paid $200 plus a flight to spend a weekend teaching somewhere. So now that I've got to do that, that totally changes what I got, because now it's not me. Because if I go out and teach a seminar, if I make zero money, that's on me. It's my business. I can choose to do that. But if I'm going to ask Corey or Trey to go out and teach, I've got to pay you to do it, which means I had to create structure around, here's what I got to charge to teach a seminar. And that's really that was another big shift in saying, all right, this is now a business. And it was and most people don't realize, we were from 1999, where we taught our first legit seminar, to 2010, where it was just pretty much me going around teaching. And I would charge you. Trey called me up, say, Lee, hey, I'd love you to come in and teach my staff. I'd say, all right, Trey, what can you pay? What's your budget? I mean, this is really what I need to come out. And he'd be like, I don't know if I can do it. All right, tell me what. And we'd figure it out. I was almost negotiating every time. And Gray and I, we were making some money, but it wasn't until we kind of looked at it more of a business and put some structure behind it. Because let's be honest, you're only going to scale yourself and your business when you're making money and not working. So if you want to scale and make some money, you got to make money when you're not working. Whether that's online education, whether that's you're running a facility and you got 10 trainers or 2 trainers or 1 trainer. When your trainer's out there on the floor and you're in there watching YouTube, well, that's how you make money, quite honestly. And I think in order to do that, you got to create some structure, no different than running a strength and conditioning facility. When you're not out there training somebody, what do you got to pay them? What is your overhead? So you can at least make a profit off the top of that thing. And it took me probably a few years, honestly, when I'd say a few years, before I figured out how FMS could make money off of me sending somebody to teach. Because, I'm sending them out there. I know kind of what the market, and so I would send an instructor out, they'd come back, and FMS would maybe clear $100. I'm like, well, that's not sustainable. And so I had to kind of figure all of that out along the way. And then, once about 2010, probably 2010, 2011 is when we hired our first person to work. And it was more just like an administrative assistant to help me navigate all the crap I was navigating. And then we tried to create more structure to what we were doing and all that. So it was definitely throw shit at the wall, see what works for a while, but realizing that's not how you're going to sustain and create a business.
Yep.
Well, and that's the beauty part. You hear the story about Gray drawing the screen on the airplane napkin, and then you see Gray up on stage, or you see you up on stage, or you see you guys teaching a course, but there's a whole chasm of things in between that to get you from point A to point B. And that's really the goal. And in hearing these stories and just, hearing the struggles and the the stuff that you went through, that's the beauty part in all this stuff. And Corey has his story, I have my story, and hearing the FMS story is really cool, because it fills in so many of those gaps that that I never knew, and I've been around you a whole lot.
Yeah, and it shows that it's true and tested. I mean, that's the thing that with as you alluded to, Lee, is that there's so much online content now, whether it's a course or it's a DIY, it's a whatever. Somebody gets a subscription to Kajabi and they can put anything they want up. Yours is tried and tested. I mean, it has legs. It has been through the ringer, and that shows that it even to today, as it's evolving, is that this isn't a fly by night movement screen. It is a true tested system that could be in a physical therapist. It could be at a collegiate or a high school athletic department. It could be at a gym. It could be just a trainer doing their own thing. I mean, it's scalable. It has so much to it that's where I think the story is so important, that it's more than just a fly by night movement screen.
Yeah, and Corey, that's where when you're in it, and if you run a business and you guys run your businesses, when you're in it, you don't get it, you don't appreciate it, because it's like you're drinking from a fire hose half the time, and trying to just when you look back, when Gray and I look back now, especially because we are the older guys, we're kind of we come up on stage and we do our thing. The young people are like, who are these old guys? I mean, it's kind of funny to say it, but it's true.
Yeah.
And especially now, I would argue most people, I don't have the data to say this is exactly true, but I'd say 50-60% of the people that take FMS level 1 right now only take it because they're told to by somebody. Meaning, whether it's the owner of the business telling their new staff they got to go take it. And when you do that, they're not fully, and again, this is partly on me, and that's why one reason we're making some changes and trying to continue to evolve and all this, is when they say, you need to go take the FMS. Well, when that 21, 22, 23-year-old individual goes and does that, they're not interested. They're just checking a box. Yeah, they're checking a box without fully understanding all the things that because most people just look at, the FMS, whatever, I took that course and I do a movement screen, but then, whatever. And not understanding, I think, again, that's what we at FMS have to do a much better job for people to understand, here's why this information is important. And that's just a battle. That's just a constant battle. And I think the battle now, I was talking to some education directors overseeing large organizations. The biggest battle right now, it is a battle, but I'll say the biggest competition to providing education is YouTube to this next generation of trainers. Because this next generation of trainers and strength coaches are getting 95%, who knows how much information from YouTube, and think that that's all they need. And that's where the information gets watered down. I mean, I get it all the time. Yeah, Lee, I know how to do the movement screen. I saw somebody do it because you go YouTube, the movement screen right now, and you'll see a lot of people that are doing a movement screen, and they're doing it to show their clients that I do it. But what is happening is a lot of people that are getting educated just randomly, like the most popular FMS screen right now is not from Lee and Gray. It's from a lot of other people. We're way down on YouTube, but that's where people are learning it right now. And I think that's what I'm battling as far as an education provider.
So you speak of the evolution. So where are things going now? What's on the horizon? What's the new stuff? Where's FMS going?
So I'll give you an idea. If we look at just FMS, we added ankle mobility into the FMS. Most people don't realize it's probably 7 or 8 years ago. We knew we needed an ankle screen probably 15 years ago, but it took us a while to figure out which test, how we want to do it, blah, blah, blah. So it took us a while to do that. When we developed the FMS, we did it in a year because we didn't know any better. We said, we're going to do it, and we'll see what happens. We somewhat got a little lucky when it came to that. But as far as now, I'll tell you a little behind the scenes of FMS. We're looking at changing up the shoulder impingement part. So if you know anything about FMS, you place your hand on your opposite shoulder, you point your elbow up, and it's a solid impingement test that's been around for years and years, not by FMS, but in the world of orthopedics. Well, more research has come out that says that test it doesn't tell us what we want. So we're playing around with another way. We've got one. We got to vet it a little bit more on clearing the shoulder, because one, we know most people fail shoulder testing across the board, and two, we know the one that we got doesn't do what we need to do. So we're going to change that up. And the other big thing is we're introducing this functional wellness, more holistic approach to screening. Call it the functional wellness screen. And we designed it in a way that looks at all the other things that we know that impact movement, like your sleep, like your breathing, like your injury history. So we've added in a much more holistic approach. And what we did, Trey, is we did it so it's a self-screen. We've been asked for years, how do you scale this? How do I go to a large group and screen all these athletes or screen this group of firefighters, athletes being one? I go out, and when I was the athletic trainer at a high school, I had 150 football players from 7th grade to seniors in high school. How do I screen all those players? And so we wanted to come up with a way to do it without, a camera system is fine, all that. But we just said, you know what? Let's come up with a way that you at home can screen yourself, answer some questions, and we can then determine where your limitations are. But also by adding in these questions, adding in these other factors, we can determine your injury risk. So we got a new product called Simio, which is taking the functional wellness screen, which is looking at basic movements. Can you touch your toes? Can you bend? Can you balance? Just fundamental things, not a full FMS because we can't do that on your own. And then we ask a series of questions, and we can, one, figure out what you need to focus on, but two, put you in an injury risk category. So if I've got a group of 100 people, I can sit there, and we did this at Perform Better's summits this year. I can deploy it out. We did it this summer. And what we did is everybody in the audience did it. And we got through during the summer. We had, I think it was like 400, 500 individuals that we have done that with. And at Perform Better, these are all professionals, either fitness professionals or healthcare providers. And we did that. And I collected all that data in about 15 minutes. So in 15 minutes, I can send this out to a group. I can look at the data from my dashboard. So I pulled up that data, and here's what's interesting. In that data, over 70% were in the high to moderate risk category, and that's professionals. Now, in my firefighter data, I've got about 500 first responders. We got Simio in a handful of fire departments, pretty large fire departments right now. They're at 60% high to moderate risk. So in our professional group, the one that I did at Perform Better, sleep was a big problem, but behavioral health was a big problem. So our professionals are sleep deprived and they're stressed out, and 30% are in pain. And this is the professional group. So you can only imagine what the general population is like. So in different groups, we see different things. So in my firefighter group, behavioral health was actually not that bad, but sleep was really bad. But in that group, they had a lot of pain. So as something that I found interesting, I spoke at a health and fitness conference, the state of Florida, back in December. And I presented this data because I had a couple of departments in Florida that were using it, so I presented the data. And the entire 3 days I was there, it was a 3-day conference, they were focused on two things. They were focused on improving sleep, and they were focused on behavioral health. Understood, right? And a lot of what they're saying is they got to change their shifts. They got to do, some of these departments were changing up the sleeping arrangements, like literally building and changing up the footprint of where these guys sleep. I come up and I say, yes, you're right. Sleep's a problem. Based off my data of these over 500 firefighters, behavioral health doesn't seem to be a major driver. But you got 45 to 50% are in pain, like right now. So that's the elephant in the room, because if you're in pain, you're not going to sleep very well. your behavioral health is going to be screwed up. And oh, by the way, when you go on the job, you're not going to move very well. So we can talk about all this other stuff, but you're missing the biggest opportunity with trying to give these individuals who are in pain, which you're talking about 500 people, 40%, you're at 200 people that are hurt. And hurt not to the point where they're going to the doctor, but hurt because, they're just because we hurt, right? So I think that's the type of thinking that we're trying to wrap our heads around. And I was able to collect that data in literally 10 minutes, standing literally when some of those firefighter groups, I'd stand in front of them and say, hey, get your phone out, follow along, let's do it. 15 minutes later, I got the data. And the one thing that we try to do with that, a self-screen like that, is create awareness. I'm not expecting a lot of people to take action. However, if I can give you the gauges to your car right in front of you, and I can give the gauges to you right in front of you, and you're like, crap, I didn't realize that I'm this bad. Maybe you can do something about it. So I think that gets overlooked too. We're so inclined to, and I go back to that thing about that little research project we did with the 2 facilities. It's about awareness. We got to give people an idea of where they are so they can make change. And the only way you make behavioral change is if you set them up with awareness first. Here's where you are. Here's where you need to work. And by us just telling them, it's not nearly as powerful as them realizing it on their own.
Yeah. Sorry about dropping off. We had a power surge here. I lost the internet. So I'm back now. But that brings up a really good point. My gym specializes in fitness after 40. And you'd be amazed at how many people come in and they go, oh, I'm old. My back hurts. I'm old. My knee hurts. And the awareness is that, you're old, but that doesn't mean that your knee or your back or your neck or your shoulder or all of those just starts to hurt all of a sudden due to your calendar age. It has to do with all these other things. So if we can bring that awareness to them, then they actually want to change it versus just accepting the fact. I just have to accept the fact that I'm now 50 and my knees are going to hurt. And I think that's a huge tool for us as coaches to utilize. And like you said, put the gauges right in front of them. Let's just make it blatantly obvious, and then they will start to take some of that responsibility on their own.
Right, because if they're not willing to, Corey, you just hit the nail on the head in my opinion. If they're not willing to take some ownership and hold themselves accountable, we as coaches can only do that when we're with them. They're not going to be. They're going to be outside of your, supervision 95% of the time, 99% of the time, really. Yep. So they've got to hold themselves accountable, or they're not going to change, or there's going to be a constant battle.
Yeah.
So, Lee, to wrap this up, I got one more question, and you talked a lot about the young trainer and the younger person. So for somebody who's out there and they're thinking about FMS, they're thinking about going through the level 1 and continuing on to the level 2. They're starting the academy. What's the one thing or the couple things that you think are really important to know, not about the screen, but what the whole thing really means? What's the 1 or 2 pieces of advice that you would give to that person starting out to say, this is what FMS is and this is what it's all about?
And before you answer that, if I could add on to that, Lee, because you did say the most of the people or younger trainers are getting their education from YouTube. Why go to an FMS course? Why go to the FMS Academy versus learning it through, those 1 million, 2 million view videos?
Yeah, so I'll give you the quick down and dirty Trey answer, and then Corey, I'll kind of tap on, because that is a battle with the YouTube. And it's something we have to embrace. YouTube's a great vehicle, but I think the one thing about down and dirty is don't overcomplicate even training somebody. Can they move and just move well or okay? And if they can't, that's okay too, but meet them where they are. So when somebody does a movement screen and they're new and they go through it and they're learning and we're throwing a lot of information at them, At the end of the day, you're just trying to see, can somebody squat? Can somebody lunge? Does somebody have good mobility in their upper and lower body? And if they don't, those are things we need to avoid doing. But if they can do, so what it's really about can and can't. And that should give you some guidelines as you start training somebody. And that's as simple as I think we can make it. Don't get all caught up in the scores and all this stuff. And hey, can they do this thing or not? And if they can't do it, then fine. Let's give them another alternative. If I can't squat, does not mean I can't strengthen my legs up. Can you single leg squat? Can you deadlift? You know, that's really the guidelines that the FMS was designed to do. Figure out where you are, make sure we're not making it worse. And oh, by the way, if we need to do that movement, let's make sure we're trying to give you some things that can improve it. And then as far as the, YouTube, when you come to an FMS, we're going to give you the specific instructions, because here's the biggest thing that we spent most of the time when we developed the FMS, not on the movements. The movements were easy. We got to squat, we got to lunge, we got to make sure we got hip mobility up. That was simple. Hey, we need to have a push up in there. That was simple. It's the specifics on making sure that everybody that's on this or listening to this can get the right results. When I'm going to do an overhead squat and I'm going to check your lunge, there's a specific way you got to do it so that you are reliable and that you can reproduce that every time. It's like you want to check somebody's 40-yard dash. Well, you need to make sure they're doing 40 yards and not 41, not 39, not 38. And a movement screen or assessment is no different. If you just watch somebody do it and then go and say, all right, I'm going to do my own version, well, you better make sure you do that same version every time you do it, because you don't know if you are getting the same results every time you do it. Because you may think you are, but maybe their foot's turned a little way different. Maybe they're, not the same position next time. I think that plus kind of that underlying philosophy of why you are doing a movement screen. That's the most important. Why am I looking at it? So not even Corey, my thing is not even why you're doing a movement screen, but why are we looking at the squat the way? Why do we put the arms overhead? We have a specific reason why we are doing everything we're doing, which gives you that knowledge, because the biggest thing you want to take that knowledge to do is explain to the client or athlete you're working with why they're doing it, because they need to know, because they need to become aware. Okay, this is why you're asking me to step over this string. You're checking my balance. You're checking my stride. So when I go out and run, I can do that better. That's what you get in an FMS versus watching somebody go through a movement screen.
I agree. It's more than just the tool. It's the reason behind the tool. Anybody can learn the tool, but it's the methodology and the purpose behind each of the movements in the movement screen, and then how to use that information to ultimately, what we're all in it for, is to improve our client.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Lee, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. I don't want to take up all your time. Everybody check out Functional Movement Systems, www.functionalmovement.com. You can catch them on all the socials at Functional Movement. You can catch Lee at L Burton FMS 01 on Instagram. He's got lots of great content, not just the questionable content. So, Lee, thanks again for doing this, man. I appreciate it so much. Always. This one was very special for me. So, yeah, man, I appreciate you so much for doing it.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate being on here anytime. Great seeing you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So,
all right.
Thank you for joining us on the Coaches Unscripted podcast. We hope today's stories have inspired and empowered you in your coaching journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow coaches. Connect with us on Instagram at Coaches Unscripted Podcast. Continue the conversation to stay updated on future episodes. Until next time, for Corey Smallwood, thanks again to Lee Burton. I'm Trey Belcher. Keep coaching from the heart and building strong communities.